In today's show, I got the path, the blueprint, the way that the Blazers can get a top 5 seed in the Western Conference. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Locked On Blazers.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter Mike Richmond, and you are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making the show your first listen every day. Free on all platforms, 5 days a week, coming at you every single weekday, the only daily Trailblazers podcast, rolling along all through July, deep into the off season. So make it your first listen every day. Start your day with Locked On Blazers. In today's show, I'm going to lay out what I believe is the path to the Blazers getting home court advantage in the playoffs, to being a top 5 team in the West or a top 4 team in the West to get that home court. I think there's some clear sort of benchmarks they have to hit, and I'm going to lay that out for you. However, part of this is not it's not a mea culpa, because I don't say things on here I don't believe. Sometimes I say stuff that I am talked out of later, but yesterday's show, my friend Chuck, Charles Tuggle, joined me on the program, longtime friend of the podcast and my friend in real life. And we did like where do the Blazers stack up in the West? It was just like a simple exercise. Is this team better than the Blazers? And he had them like the 9th best team in the West, assuming everybody's healthy. And I had them like the 10th best team in the West. And that's some real hateration. I still kind of feel that way if everybody's healthy. Everybody won't be healthy. It's not going to it's not how it shakes out, blah, blah, blah. Somebody's going to rise, somebody's going to fall. It's how it happens. It's like why the NBA is fun, right? Is because like the predictions you make in July are not correct or like even relevant by the time you get to February, much less beyond that into the spring. So this isn't like me backtracking. This is me saying, here's how it would have to work for them to outperform, frankly, my expectations, and for them to get where they want to go. They want to be a team that has like real, skin in the game, is a competitive playoff team that's going for it. They've made some, they've upgraded the roster from last season and made some really intentional moves to get better. So what I'm going to do in today's show is lay out what I believe are the things that have to happen for them to get there. And the number one thing and the most simple thing is that Damian Lillard has to be Damian Lillard. If Dame is Dame, you get so many boxes checked immediately. He was not healthy last season from the jump. He was clearly hurt in the Olympics, didn't have surgery for a variety of reasons, and thought that the rest would allow him to get back. And to be clear, Dame has dealt with this abdominal thing from time to time over like 4 or 5 seasons. And rest, taking a little time off, getting off his feet, it's allowed him to play through it or to overcome those things. He thought he was going to get there again. He never did. He was hurt from day one and did not look like himself. Basically had like a handful of flashes where you're like, oh yeah, I remember him, but never looked like himself. And when they shut him down, it was just his last game was December 31st. He looked terrible in that game and then it didn't play again for the rest of the year. He had surgery. He's had extended time off, both physically and mentally. I think the mental break is really important. The physical break, huge, because, right, you just got to get your body right. But the mental break, to recharge, to sort of watch the league move around him, and to get, as he likes to say, to use a Damian Lillard for it, to get his mind right. Come back and be Dame. That is the most important thing for the Blazers. Because the best version of Damian Lillard, 28 points, 4 boards, 8 assists on something like 40-40-90 shooting, is an offense unto himself, is like the 10th best. Like Damian Lillard at that level guarantees you 39 wins. Like he's on the court, you're going to win 39 games, period. The rest of your part of the roster parts would push you over to being an above 500 team or whatever. But like you're going to be good and competitive. 39 is not like a really good number, but like, is it just absolutely you're not going to bottom out with Dame because you're going to be one of the 10 best offenses in the league with Damian Lillard. Last time we saw him, he averaged that 28, 4 and 8. So like when we saw him whole in the season prior to last, in the 2020-2021 season. Before that, in the bubble year, like he averaged right around there, 28, 4, and 7, and then he averaged like 38 a game in 8 games in the bubble and pushed himself up to averaging like 30 and 10. Like he's capable of getting to crazy heights. The last time we saw him play a fully healthy NBA basketball game, or one of the last times we saw him play a fully healthy NBA basketball game, he had 55 in the playoffs. Like, he's not that far removed. A 55-10 game in the playoffs, one of the great offensive performances you will ever see from anyone. I don't think he's that far removed from that. I don't think it's that crazy to think that Dame could get back there. In fact, among all of the things that I'm going to lay out here, this seems like the most bankable, is that Dame is Dame. I know that 32 scares some people, the wrong side of 30. You've all been poisoned by very smart person Nate Duncan, but Nate Duncan has poisoned you to think that people get old fast. There's a lot of stars, a lot of shooting stars that can be really good. Chris Paul, the reason why he's aged so well and was really good and at 37 was because he's one of the best shooters of all time. Steph Curry's one of the most dominant players in the league because he's one of the best shooters of all time, but not the best shooter. He is the best shooter of all time. Dame is like a better shooter than Chris Paul probably, and pushing up towards that Curry level of shooter. He's a guy I'm comfortable with him aging because his game is suited to aging. If Dame is Dame, the Blazers are going to get back on track. That is step one for how does this team become a home court advantage type team, a top 5 team in the West. Dame is Dame. But he also needs that sidekick. And I think the second thing for me is that Anfernee Simons continues his rise. When Ant was given the keys, had the ball in his hands, and was the leader of the band, he was awesome. Awesome. Not good, but great, to steal a Jay Billis line. Not good, but great. But he was also the conductor of the whole dang show. Like, he got the ball in his hands. He got to run a cajillion pick and rolls. When he was he was like a 30-7 borderline all-star. He was really good. Really, really, really good. Fantastic. Good, not great. There will be a portion of the season where Ant does get the ball in his hands. Portion of every night where Ant gets the ball in his hands and gets to do what he does. The question for me is, Ant, can he scale and continue to be awesome when he has a little bit of a secondary role? Like when he's the number 2 guy, and particularly closing games as the number 2 guy, playing off Dame. I think he's fine. He's a better catch-and-shoot jump shooter than CJ McCollum, that's for sure. He's a better athlete, although it doesn't always show up in Ant's game because he still doesn't. While he gets to the rim, he doesn't finish at the rim as well as he could, and he's missing maybe the pull-up game if CJ has. But he has the shooting is he's a better shooter than CJ. That's an off-ball skill. If he continues to grow as a driver, continues to grow as a finisher, he's showed that he took major steps forward in a brief period of time as a playmaker. He has the tools to be CJ McCollum light or just straight up the CJ McCollum production. I don't want to say better than CJ because I think it's CJ McCollum's really good. And I don't want to say easy peasy better than CJ McCollum. But right up there, don't miss a beat type of production. I think this is the fairest way to put it. Ant obviously is 22 and has a ceiling that is very high. But step one, checkbox one, how do you get to, first box you got to check here, how do you get to be a top 5 team in the West, is that Ant continues his rise. I don't want to put unfair expectations on him. I don't want to scream all-star. I don't want to scream all these things. If Anfernee Simons averages 22 and 4, the Blazers are going to be right back on track, and he can average 22 and 4. That's easy for him. I don't know, easy is probably an overstatement, but he's capable of putting up 22 and 4 with a big minute role on a good team. No doubt about it. He can be that guy. He can be that guy quickly. He can be that guy night 1, first quarter 1. He's that explosive. And part of the Blazers' calculation is that they do not miss a beat in the backcourt. Dame is Dame, and Ant continues to rise. Those are your first 2 steps. Step 2 is the other side of the ball. And I think that's the question. Let's talk about that question and that defense and what it has to, non-negotiable, has to look like for the Blazers to get where they want to go. But first, let me tell you about Bet Online, where you can go right now to betonline.net and get plus 7,500 odds on the Blazers to win the championship. The 10th shortest odds in the Western Conference. The bookmakers, odds makers, my good friends at betonline.net, they agree with me that the Blazers are about 10th in the West, 10th shortest odds in the Western Conference. you can win some money proving me and BetOnline wrong. If you don't want to bet on NBA futures, they got everything else on there. Major League Baseball, second half of Major League Baseball season, the end of the WNBA season. You can bet on the NWSL. You can bet on MLS if you want to bet on North American soccer leagues. You got combat sports, you got golf, you got tennis, whatever it is, go to betonline.net and check it out today. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. The Blazers' easiest path to being a really good basketball team is have Dame be Dame and Ant continue his rise. Those I can pretty much bank on those things. Feel very, 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 very comfortable with Damian Lillard's production. I think he's an excellent basketball player. He's one of the best players I've ever seen. I think Ant can get to the level he needs to get to. The rest of the Blazers' path, and that's what we're doing here today, is finding the Blazers' path to being a top 5 team in the West, a team that avoids the play-in, a team that, is a home court advantage type team, top 4, top 5 in the West. The next path is the other side of the ball. The next box they got to check is the other side of the ball. The defense has to get there. And let me give you some numbers to back it up, because it's easy to say, oh, the defense has to be better. No S, Sherlock. It certainly does. In the West last year, there were 7 teams that had winning records. Golden State, Phoenix, Memphis, Dallas, Utah, Denver, and Minnesota. All of those teams had an above-average defense except for the Denver Nuggets, who were 15th in defense. The top 5 teams in the Western Conference all had a top 10 defense. The top 4 teams in the Western Conference all had a top 8 defense. Golden State 2, Phoenix 3, Memphis 5, Dallas 8, Utah 9, Minnesota 13, Denver 15. Those are numbers according to cleaningtheglass.com, the indispensable cleaningtheglass.com, thanks to Ben Falk. Those are defensive ratings, points allowed per 100 possessions. Those are rankings, defensive points scored rankings. Cleaning the Glass scrubs some garbage time from games, so you don't get sort of nonsense minutes. It's really close to what the NBA has, but I think it's a little bit better measure. But what it tells you more than anything, is that the Blazers have to be an above-average defense to be in the playoff picture, period. A non-negotiable, period. They have to be an above-average defense. This team cannot be like, oh, they kind of got there. They're 17th on defense. They're slightly below average, but their offense rocks. That will get them close. I think it'll make them a fun, entertaining team and a team that can beat anyone on any given night. But for real serious, right there in the playoffs, one of the 7 best teams in the West, a chance to just win and get in a play-in round or avoid the play-in altogether, non-negotiable above average defense. And if they want to be a team that avoids the play-in altogether, that gets either home court advantage or is a top 6 team, you're going to have to be a top 10 defense. If you want a home court advantage, you need to be a top 10 defense. The 4 teams that had home court advantage in the Western Conference were in the top 8 in defense. You cannot outside of the top 10, you are probably not a home court advantage team. You're on the cusp. And Utah, who finished 5th, they were the best offense in the league and the 9th best defense in the league, and they still finished 5th in the West because they had some stinkers because they had bad vibes. They got to get there. The reason the Blazers hired Chauncey Billups is because he could get them there. The reason that they have gone sort of all in on a certain defensive identity, I don't know all in, but they've leaned into a certain defensive identity is because they think they can get there, and they know they have to get there. You signed Jeremy Grant. In my eyes, he's perhaps the biggest swing player on the roster because he's your clear third option on offense. He's someone you can go to, the best forward the Blazers have had since LaMarcus Aldridge left. It's been a long road, and this is coming from someone who loves Al-Farouq Aminu. But it's not close. Jeremy Grant's the most talented forward, true forward they've had since LaMarcus left. And his job is going to be prop up that defense because when the dudes on the other team come to town, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant for whatever team he plays for, LeBron James, Paul George when he shows up also, Luka Doncic, when the best apex big old wings come to town, Giannis Antetokounmpo, throw him in there. Jason Tatum, throw him in there. The name they're going to ask to stop those dudes is almost certainly Jeremy Grant first. Might be some other people second, but Jeremy Grant first. And the way he's going to take this team to where they want to go is being that guy who delivers. He isn't the only person that they've leaned on to be a better defensive team. They spent a bunch of money and triggered the hard cap because they wanted to get Gary Payton on the team. And whether you think it was a good signing or a bad signing, it was a very intentional move by this team. They paid him more than Golden State was offering, and they prioritized him early in free agency to add a great point of attack defender in Gary Payton, a guy who is 6'3" but plays bigger than he is, but is a defensive guard and is best suited as guarding, elite guards, elite ball handlers, not true bigs. Those are defensive upgrades. The Jeremy Grant and the GP thing is defensive upgrades. I think Josh Hart's probably a better defender than Norman Powell. Nazir Little has, he's got to stay healthy, but he's shown some chops on defense. I think Justice Winslow has some real defensive ability there. This is a team that has a not at its stars. Dame and Ant are still not good defensive players, but in the role players that they have prioritized defense and versatility. When Jusuf Nurkic has been on the court traditionally over the last 5 seasons, the Blazers have been an average to above average defense. It has to work. And it has to work with Billups. And I'll say this, coaches get better. I don't think Chauncey Billups did a very good job in year 1. He also had a really, really interesting and challenging run because Damian Lillard wasn't healthy, and that killed all of the calculations. But Portland was never good on defense. Now, for one moment, maybe one moment, the second game of the year, they beat the Suns. One moment, one Saturday in October, very briefly, 48 minutes for a whole year. They had a good defensive game. They had some other nice defensive showings, and that's I think people misremembered a little bit. But the 4-game winning streak right before the All-Star break, they played pretty. They played some better defense. Josh Hart got really hot from 3, and they played really well on offense against the Memphis Grizzlies. But they weren't good. But coaches improve. Coaches get better. And what you're banking on for part of this as the defense getting there is the defense guy you hired in Chauncey gets there and brings this team along. Gets them there, gets the buy-in. We know what the Blazers are going to want to do. They're going to play a whole bunch of zone. They're going to switch a lot. They're going to trap and be aggressive on the ball away from the rim. They're going to try to show and recover of sort of a variety of levels of commitment to trapping. But they're going to be an aggressive defense. They're going to want to fly around. Billups wants to show help, and then he wants to, he wants his team to sprint and recover and cover each other on the backside. He wants to play an aggressive style of defense that demands connectivity. The defensive personnel has been upgraded to fit this look, to fit it. Jeremy Grant and GP fit it. The growth of Nas fits it. Winslow and Josh Hart fit it. I'm not so sure Dame and Ant fit it, but they're propping up this team to be a top 5 offense in the league. They get to, if they can be part of a defensive ecosystem that is the 8th best defense in the league, Portland's going to be right there. They're going to be the 4th best team in the West. That's their path. That's their benchmark. If the Blazers are an average defensive team, 15th, 14-15, they are going to be teetering on a play-in team. If they are a below-average defensive team this year, they're going to be a play-in team or worse. It is a non-negotiable that the defense has to get there. This isn't like hey, it would be nice. If they're going to talk a big game, and they are, and then they deserve the right to, everyone gets to puff out your chest. And they've got talent to get there. But this is the non-negotiable. This is the question mark. The defense has to get there because all of the other, I think the offense stuff is like an easy box to check. Like I said, if Dame's healthy and if Dame's Dame, they're fine. This is the challenge. There's one other challenge too. It's the availability of Jusuf Nurkic and whether this banking on small ball works. Let's talk about what this team is truly banking on in the third segment. Join me there, will you? Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked on Blazers. Talk about Dame and Ant. Talked about the defense they have to be a top 10 defense. If they're serious about getting where they want to go, top 10 defense. Something like the 9th best defense in the NBA. That's what it's got to be. But the other big part about this, and I typically want to, typically for predictions, I don't want to talk about health because just every team is like, someone's like, oh, well, they're one injury away. Damn near every team in the NBA is one injury away. Every team in the league loses their second best player, they're in trouble. Every team in the league loses their best player, they're in trouble. Handful of teams, like Memphis was deep enough last year to mitigate some of that. Phoenix was deep enough and good enough last year to mitigate some of that. Other teams were not so lucky. The LA teams, not capable of doing that type of thing. But when it comes to Jusuf Nurkic's availability, it's some of it is just like true of Nurk. He's had some injury problems. Last year, not part of the injury calculation. Anyone selling you that that bag of beans is full of not being honest with the situation. Nurk would have played a whole bunch of games and his availability would not have been in question. He was shut down for the final 20 games for the Blazers to have the access to Shaedon Sharpe. Mission accomplished. But Nurk, prior to that, has had both kind of just like nagging things and also some catastrophic bad timing stuff. A broken wrist, a broken leg, a broken bone in his leg, then a very severe broken bone in his leg. Like, he's had stuff. Before he got to Portland, he had a shoulder injury with Denver. Like, it's been part of his story. So his availability is absolutely paramount for the Blazers to be a top 5 team in the West. If they want to sniff home court advantage, Nurk has to play. But not just because Nurk is vital and he's had an injury history, because they don't have depth behind him at center. Drew Eubanks is a nice backup center. I've kind of talked myself into Drew Eubanks being a acceptable backup center. But if Drew Eubanks has to play a big minute role, like Nurk misses a handful of games here and there, and Drew Eubanks is playing 30 minutes a night, I think the team takes a serious step back. Drew Eubanks, elite hook shotter. And I love his story. Like, it's incredibly cool. It's easy. I'm rooting for him for sure. But like, I try to be honest on the show, and I don't love him as like sort of the level of NBA skill. But I don't think the Blazers want to do that. I think that when this thing gets rolling in the fall, the Blazers are going to play small in a variety of ways where Drew Eubanks probably, if I had to guess, and I'll guess now, is not part of the rotation on night one, depending on the matchup. They played a Timberwolves or somebody gigantic, or, Denver or whatever, where you have to like guard one of the true fives. But against most teams where you don't have that type of intimidating center, intimidating front line, you can go small, and the Blazers are banking on it. Chauncey Billups hinted at Summer League that the Blazers are comfortable playing Jeremy Grant at center. It's very clear the team is comfortable playing Trendon Watford a bunch at center, and he'll get minutes there. I think they're going to play small looks with, Justice Winslow has played a little bit of weird center on some funky Miami teams. I don't know if Portland will lean in that far, but like, they're going to play small with a bunch of wings. It's an identity that some of the best teams in the league have adopted in the playoffs. It's an identity that the Clippers have maybe more adopted in the regular season, the place where Chauncey Billups kind of learned to coach, the incubator program that was 1 year on Ty Lue's bench and a deep friendship with Ty Lue prior to that like kind of gave Chauncey a blueprint to, I believe, how he wants to play. An aggressive style of defense with a bunch of wings. That's what the Clippers do. I think Billups is building something similar. Obviously, like, you started with Damon Ant, it's not identical by any means, but it's something similar. They're comfortable playing small. So part of this calculation and how they finish as a top 5 team in the West, how they finish with a team that flirts with home court advantage and just avoids the play-in altogether, is that small ball works. Is that the Gary Payton thing works. He allows them to play small. It's that they can play some minutes with a 3-guard lineup with Josh Hart or Gary Payton in there at the 3. That they can play some minutes with Nazir Little and Justice Winslow at the 4 because they're going to have to. And some minutes with Trendon Watford and Jeremy Grant at the 5 because they want to and they're going to have to. Nurk's availability so they can play big when they need to, and his just like, Nurk is not a good shot blocker, but he's a great rim deterrer. Like, the numbers from B-Ball Index suggest that Nurk keeps people from driving to the rim, but once they get there, he doesn't stop them at finishing at the rim. One of the great, just his size and his positioning, he's a smart defender and a giant person, keeps people from going into the paint. He's giant and he knows where to be, but he's not like an elite vertical rim protector type. That's not who Nurk is. In fact, he's got better hands stealing the ball than blocking shots for sure. He has propped up the Blazers to be a pretty good defense. And the minutes when Nurk isn't on the floor, the small ball experiment that the team very, very, very clearly leaned into, is comfortable with and made like specific decisions to do. Like they used their money in a specific way. It's like beyond the value judgment, just like the reality is this is what they wanted to do when they went and did it. It's got to work. That's how they end up as a top 5 team in the West. I'm a little skeptical of it. Like I think I've said this before and I'll say it again. I'll probably say it a bunch of times here before the season starts. Is I really like the Blazers players. Josh Hart's fun. I really like Josh Hart. I like Justice Winslow. I like Nasir Little. I love Gary Payton. I've bought in on the idea of Jeremy Grant, although maybe I'm not a huge fan of him. I'm a believer in Nurk. Damian Lillard has brought me probably as much joy as anyone playing basketball in the NBA over the last decade. Anfernee Simons was incredibly fun last year. Like, I like their parts. I'm rooting hard for Drew Eubanks. Jabari Walker, I'm basically like the leading evangelist in North Portland. Jabari Walker evangelist. I have, if you're a long-time listener to the program, you know that I love me some Trendon Watford as well. I've probably overrated his game a bunch of times right here into this very microphone. I like their players. I'm just a little skeptical of the roster as a construction. So one of the things they need to do is make me look stupid. Small ball has to work. Dame has to be Dame. Ant has to continue his rise. And the defense has to be a top 10 outfit in the NBA. That's the checklist. That's the path. If you listened to yesterday's show and you thought that I was being too much of a hater, I wanted to give you something else. Here's how I think it has to work for them to get there. Even if I'm a skeptic, and I am, like at my heart, I'm a pessimist and a skeptic. That's who I'm going to be on this. Even if I'm pro-joy, I'm also like a pessimist at heart. So regardless of what I think, what I believe is maybe not as important as what I kind of know is the path. And I think this right here that I laid out in today's show has to be the path. That has to be the direction they go. And if they don't kind of hit on these things, if they don't get 75 games in Nurk, and if they're not a top 10 defense in the league, they're going to be in the play-in in a brutal Western Conference. There are 10 really good teams. Then there's also the Kings. Then there's some teams that are being actively bad. 10 competitive teams, 10 teams that could make the playoffs in a field, and also the Kings. 10 teams that could make the playoffs in a field that's only going to take 8 when it's all said and done. And if you're 7 or 8, it's really hard to win a playoff series. Like, good teams are going to be there. The Blazers want to avoid that. If they want to be a top 5 team in the West, if they want to be even better, a home court advantage, top 4 team in the West, this was the blueprint. That's their path. Let me know what you think. Email me, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com, or let me know in the YouTube comments if you're a YouTube watcher. I appreciate you listening. We'll have more shows later this week looking at the rest of the Blazers offseason, looking ahead a little bit, and having a bunch of fun. Locked On Blazers rolling along. We are daily podcast through the end of July. We're going to slow things down a little bit when we get to August, when it's truly the doldrums. But for now, if you need your daily Blazers fix, nowhere better to find it than right here in Locked On Blazers, available wherever you get podcasts, also on YouTube. Make it your first listen every day. Tell your friends to do the same. Why not make your second listen Locked On NBA? Find out what's happening across the league on our overarching NBA show on the podcast. Check it out and come back. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.